New for 2018 in Kawasaki's accessory range is this amazing life-size Z650 shaped coffee holder. It's a bit slippy, but I think you'll find it works a treat. Obviously that was me telling a hilarious joke. I'm warming up with a coffee at Kawasaki's headquarters in Bourne End, not far outside London. I've just spent a fantastic afternoon having a ride round on the 2017 Kawasaki Z650. So for 2017, Kawasaki replaced, you may remember, the ER6, F and N, parallel twin 650, kind of staple diet of training schools and newbie bikers up and down the country, indeed up and down any country all over the world. I'm not going to try and convince anyone that that was an amazing bike. It was a bit of a kind of do everything budget beginner bike. Much like this one, there's a little bit more going on inside this bike and outside this bike than the old version. Aside from the fact that this bike has now adopted the Z moniker that you'll find on 800, 1000, 300, take your pick, there's stacks of bikes that carry the Z moniker in the Kawasaki lineup. I think it suits the nature of carrying that Z as well. It's a much more lively performer than the outgoing ER6. So the biggest thing you'll notice straight away is this trellis frame. Kawasaki have pitched in their marketing blurb that it's kind of H2 derived. I'm going to say possibly H2 inspired. It is a trellis frame, much like the H2. It is made in a factory by people that work for Kawasaki, much like H2. I'm guessing, aside from the paint that they chuck at both of them, that's pretty much where the similarities will end. In meeting Euro 4, the Z650 is actually down on power compared to the outgoing or the old ER6. This one is about 67, 68 horsepower. The ER6 was 71, but this does indeed meet EU4 legislation. Interestingly for me, I don't necessarily care that the power is down on paper because there's a 10 kilo saving in the chassis alone. That trellis frame saves a massive amount of weight. So when you couple that 68 horsepower with a ready-to-ride weight of 187 kilograms, doesn't sound like a massively appealing mix for a decent day out on a bike. The reality is, this bike is much more fun than it sounds like it should be. I know that when Susie rode the fared version back in the summer, she called it a bit of a wet fart, and I'd be inclined to agree, again, on paper or just looking at the specs alone, or just listening to the sound of the thing. It does sound a little bit muted. So it's a relatively simple piece of kit. 6-speed gearbox, 300mm twin discs at the front with 2 piston calipers, ABS, single piston caliper out the back, non-adjustable 41mm forks at the front. One of the other plus or minus points, depending on how you look at it, is the seat height on this bike. The seat is 790mm from the ground, and this seat compared to the ER6 one is slightly thinner and slightly narrower. After 4 or 5 hours that I've been on it, I'd say that I'd probably prefer a slightly more padded seat. That said, there is plenty of room to move around on the bike. It's quite a small thing, it's quite a dainty little bike, but that doesn't mean it feels too small once you're on it. It is essentially a bike for newbies, shorties and ladies, and I'm not being ist in any kind of way, ladyist or sexist or shortist or whatever you like. It is what it is. This is a bike that suits people that are a little bit short in the leg, or people that are looking for that kind of boost in confidence in being able to put 2 feet on the ground at a set of traffic lights. There's a couple of new details on this bike that the old one didn't have. The kind of digital detail in the middle of the dash is A, functional, and B, quite funky. It definitely works in low light or high light. There's been a couple of times today where the sun was beating down on the clocks. I was still able to see how fast I was going, how many revs I was doing, what gear I was in, how much fuel I had left. All of the important stuff is nestled nicely in this quite tidy clock set that has this fairly functional yet swankily stylish, making that up as I go along, mini screen that sits around the front of the clocks. As a styling cue, it works. There's a flow to the bike from front to back, but the functionality is still there as well. There are a couple of screw heads visible and little bits and pieces that I thought maybe it would have been better off if they were covered up or if they were at least colour coded, but it's a budget bike. At £6,199, it's supposedly, for most of us, relatively affordable. Handily, it's also exactly the same price as Yamaha's MT-07, a direct competitor, and both Yamaha and this Kawasaki are about £400 more expensive than Suzuki's SV650. So I guess it's important to consider whether or not the nature of a parallel twin is something that you could put up with or live with every day. By nature, they are pretty vibey little motors. I found the more I revved it, the smoother it seemed to get. I spent a little bit of time on the motorway. It was quite happy batting along at 70 miles an hour. Definitely didn't go any more than 70 miles an hour, and it definitely didn't get better the faster over 70 that I went. Interestingly as well, despite that tiny sacrifice in top end power, revving the thing out through the gears on some of the back lanes that we were on today was really, really good fun. There's plenty of power up top end of the rev range. There's a healthy amount of torque that allowed me to make use of the fantastic fueling that this bike has. It's super clean. Dropping down to 30 miles an hour in fourth or sometimes even fifth gear and just dumping a load of revs into the thing, I didn't have it clunking away and trying to beat the pistons out the sidewalls of the motor. It just gets on with the job. It finds some torque, picks up its skirt and just gently throws you up the road. It's not about to bend anybody's mind with kind of crazy levels of acceleration. The front wheel only came off the floor today a couple of times when I was forcing it to. This is a great first big bike. It's a 650cc bike. You know, you're going to feel like you're in the big boys club when you tell your mates you've got a 650, and it will get better the better you get as you gain more experience while you're out there on the roads. Dynamic is a word that I know I sometimes use too much when it comes to describing bikes. It's like a broad brush that you can use to describe anything that's half decent in any bike. But it's a great way of describing Z650. It is a capable performer, but you shouldn't let that scare you away from this bike if you're new to biking. So I think for me, with a cheeky little pipe on one of these, and I'd absolutely wang these Dunlops as far over the nearest hedge as I could and stick some decent sticky tyres on the thing, I know I'd have as much fun, at least as much fun as I would on an MT-07. It's the same old thing. It boils down to which brand you can associate with, which one you like the look of the most, and which one appeals to you once you've had a test ride. It could simply just be a case of green is your favourite colour. You're not going to go far wrong if you walk into a dealer and pick up one of these.